I think we'd agree, wouldn't we? So what we have today is another set of some of us explaining what we've been doing and how it's going and so on, which we're starting off with Josie, who is actually driving at the moment. So she won't be doing her presentation live, but she will be listening and perhaps answering questions and certainly hearing what we're saying. So we'll have Josie, then Valerie, then Jenny will have something to report on, which again, I think, Jenny, you're doing the recording, aren't you? Having the recording? Sorry.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so if you will allow me to manage the time, I will try and do that so that we can fit everything in reasonably.
Okay, so we're starting then with Josie's presentation.
Yeah.
Hi, and sorry for not being able to be directly there to tell you about my experience and my motivation. I'm going to share now what I will be calling the boomerang effect on the pathways for sustainability. This activity, I've been working in this activity since 2021, where I invited a set of colleagues. I work at a university, a faculty of education, and I invited my colleagues to be part of Lifewide Learning, thinking that they would be interested in sharing different experiences and sharing different pathways in their own area of expertise, but nothing really happened at that moment. I also started sharing in my other role with families in the preschool where I am the head, to help them have an opportunity to share or to develop certain activities or actions with their children regarding some of the SDGs in where they would be able to probably develop something as a family. I also wanted to share or document what they were already doing. That was my last proposal in March. I thought, because of the guilt that sometimes comes with the idea of I'm not doing enough and probably not participating because of that, I thought it would be a good idea for them to tell others what they were already doing and feel like a sense of agency, and make them want to participate and show to themselves and to their children, to their small early year children, that they were already doing things, and motivate them through a very positive things on I am already doing something. The thing is, in the very last participation of the families, there was only something like 15 families or 10 families that participated out of 80, and previous to that I didn't have much effect on my invitation. I would call it a butterfly effect or the boomerang effect, because after all these attempts, I had an invitation from one of my colleagues. So 2 years later, one of my colleagues invites me to be the jury of and assess a final project of her course regarding what she called the project of each teacher, of each couple of teachers that would be developing one of the SDGs they could choose, and they could develop a full project planning for children. And she said, I'm interested in you to being part of the jury because I know you're so interested in the SDGs and you've invited us to be part of Lifewide Learning and the project of the pathways towards sustainability. So the idea is that after 2 years, she invites me to participate in something that I didn't know it would be happening because of my first invitation 2 years ago. So they developed this project for a group of children. They're students, they are students in their teaching practice, in reception and in year one. And they had to choose one of the SDGs and present a full project planning and the result of it. And I was part of the jury, and we had, I think it was 14 projects proposed. So as I was saying, I didn't imagine that after 2 years I would have that effect. I thought no one was listening to what I was proposing or inviting them to do. So they intend to keep this as a final project as an exam for the course for several years. So what's my motivation? Well, basically the potential impact. I was calculating that in 2021 I had 0 responses from families and colleagues when I invited them. And the first impact was in March 2023, with this 15 families reporting the actions that they were doing towards one of the SDGs and discuss it as a family. Very short activity and participation. And finally this last impact in June 2023, where I had all these students involved and my colleagues involved, thinking that they have a number of people that will be involved. So if I have 40 students that are involved in a project, each one in charge of 20 children, and they will be working probably for 10 years after they finish their course. At least I'm hoping more than 10 years, but I have an impact of a number of children that I didn't know I would achieve or get to, basically. And plus the fact that the teachers will be still developing this idea of the exam. So they will be multiplying the effect with future student teachers as well. So the impact that I thought would be in my little, I would say, bubble of friends, colleagues, and families, I have the perception that they are now in a very more extended way affecting others. So the future potential, as I say in this slide, it has to do with the number of people that, as a pyramid, will be basically receiving things from an invitation that I thought had no effect whatsoever. So basically, at the beginning, I felt like a little drop, which basically became a number of drops when we participate in this kind of discussion with people that are interested in the same things and have the same motivation and probably same disappointment sometimes when things don't work the same way, but as well also the motivation of seeing some results. So you feel that you are with other people that are doing bits of the same, or isolated drops doing the same. And I kind of feel that we can become a cascade after all these very recent effects and results. Route, I would say it has to do with first paddling on your own and finding certain ways, inviting others to use boats, leave those boats available for them to join in and paddle in. And that will take us probably to have a big team that at some point will be paddling the same way. Well, I'm hoping. For me, the most relevant effect is motivating, inspiring these little ones to model a sense of wonder in them that will make them also develop a sense of community, inspire their own ecological, joyful path. That's my contribution, and thank you for motivating me, just because you're there doing the same things and feeling the same things. Thank you.
Thank you. That's lovely. We're all in the boat with you. That was great. Thank you, Josie. I was struck by how natural the process was, as in, you know, seeds flowering, water droplets gathering together, and all those images were very natural images. And we're talking about the natural world. So maybe it's not a surprise that we don't see instant impact. You know, you don't plant something and immediately it grows perfectly. You know, you sometimes have to stumble along and wait, and things don't happen in a steady progress and all of those sorts of things. So I was really struck by that when you were talking. Jenny, I think you have.
Yes, it's funny how it doesn't work out directly or the way you expect, and how it comes out a seed, it may come out with a different flower, basically.
Yes, exactly.
I think that was a wonderful example. So thank you very much, Jose. I mean, the words that were going through my mind as you were starting was your creativity, the fact that you were able to adapt and create, your resilience. And one of the issues that came through the brief survey that we did was the need for feedback. And the fact that some of these projects, as you said, you waited 2 years, you didn't give up, but 2 years later, something totally unexpected came forward. And I think that's an inspiration that we should all take. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes, it's amazing to think it is 2 years.
It is. And I wouldn't have thought, well, you know, many things you don't really know the effect it has. And maybe there are several things that I don't even know about.
Yeah, absolutely. Norman, I think you're adding something.
Yeah, I think so. You can look at it from both sides, can't you, Josie? I mean, you looked at it that someone's picked up your ideas and now you're involved in something which is totally unanticipated, which is fantastic. You can look at it also from the fact that you pick up other people's ideas. So in my case, I attended a seminar, an online seminar, webinar, and found this wonderful idea, which we call beelines. And I've been running with that this year. And now people in the next door village, because they've got to know about this, they want to run with it. So that the idea of droplets and ripples going out in very unexpected ways works in every direction as far as I can see.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Again, thank you for those images.
Anybody else? I think everybody seemed to be smiling and nodding when you were speaking in the recording, Josie, which you won't be able to see, but I think it was well received. It was a delight to listen to. So, and how optimistic, and what a lovely start for our meeting today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I'm afraid I will have to leave because I have to go into the doctor now.
Of course.
Thank
well,
you.
Good luck. Goodbye.
Thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
Okay, so Josie's probably, yes, she is now gone. So any other thoughts about what Josie was talking about, or we'll then move on to Valerie in person. So, okay, do you want to say, we'll try and talk afterwards about anything that came to mind from all of the thoughts that we've been offered.
I suppose it illustrates again that we're not really in control. We're sort of
this meeting, do you mean, or
no, with the sorts of projects that we're involved in. Once you start doing something, you have a rough idea, but all sorts of things happen. You're not really in control.
No.
But I think it also reminds us of the need to keep a longitudinal record of what's going on. And I hope that because they will do that and keep us informed as how hopefully it does spiral as she's expecting.
Yeah. And that was a very important thing that came out of Josie's, wasn't it? That we talked about scale on a number of occasions and seeing things at the right scale. But Josie was introducing scale in a different sense, that sort of unfolding time scale, which in her case has gone over two long years. And I think that's something we have to bear in mind, because we're always wanting rapid results, aren't we? We're always wanting to see things quickly, when actually there are sort of natural rhythms and cycles in things we do that there is an unfolding, isn't there, in whatever it is we're doing.
Definitely. Thank you. So, Valerie, are you?
Glenn has joined us. Melissa,
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. I apologise, Glenn. You're very film noir tonight. It looks very moody and atmospheric. So, welcome, Glenn. We've just heard from Josie, but she's had to leave. So we're now moving over to Valerie. So if we go on, and then I'm sure we'll hear from you. You look, yes, thumbs up, that's good. You're okay.
Thanks, Norman. I'm going to turn off my camera, I think, just because my internet isn't very stable, and I'll just ask you to move on the slides whenever. I'm just going to give a little bit of context on what I do, and then how I aligned what I do to the Pathways program this year. So I run a program called the Take One program, which is aimed at formal education in Ireland, lower second level school teachers, mainly principals and deputy principals. And it was really interesting to hear Josie's presentation before this and to hear the comments, because the Take One programme really grew out of all of those struggles and challenges that educators are having, probably not just in Ireland and probably not just educators, in terms of the urgency piece around climate, around sustainability, the panic that people are feeling, they're overwhelmed. And there was kind of a paralysis in terms of that, a sense of. So the idea behind the Take One programme was that it would assist teachers, certainly in the formal system, to look at taking a breath, taking one step, taking one SDG, and trying to be really focused on context and move collectively and collaboratively. So very much like a lot of what Josie was talking about there, in terms of not trying to do everything at once, but really looking after ourselves in terms of how we do that. Just the next slide. Thanks, Norman. So the aim of the programme is just to communicate, raise awareness of, and embed ESD as part of a broad curriculum. But really, my motivation is about that inclusion piece and ensuring that everybody gets an opportunity to participate and contribute. And I think certainly again in Ireland, but internationally, there's been a cohort of very strong voices and very motivated young people and adults. And I was really looking at how do we get everybody involved, and not just those people that have the confidence and capacity to speak up, but that we can contribute and collaborate in lots of ways. And sometimes that's very quietly, and sometimes that's very individually, and supporting schools to highlight that. Next slide. So initially what I did was, for a lot of educators, time is always, and for a lot of us as well, time is always a challenge. So I took the curriculum subjects of the lower, or the syllabus of the lower second level subjects across the entire curriculum. And I did a mapping exercise to highlight for educators and teachers where the Sustainable Development Goals were already in the content of what they were learning. And the idea behind this was to highlight for them and to help them and say, there's actually a lot of this here already. So it isn't about trying to find a whole host of new things to do or change the way you're doing things, but really just look at it with a different lens and take away some of that panic and urgency, and highlight for them, keep doing what you're doing, but just add a layer in that talks about sustainability being across the entire curriculum. And in this way, then every student gets an opportunity to be exposed, and every teacher as well. So instead of saying, well, you're the specialist teacher, I flipped that and said, everybody can be the specialist, because sustainability is everywhere. Next slide. So for the pathways piece this year, we generally, following the lessons, I try and encourage teachers to do something. And while I'd like them to do it all year round, we have a May Day for sustainability. And the idea is, it's a bit tongue in cheek. It's a little bit of soft panic, as in May Day, but looking at a day in the year when they can celebrate all the positive things that they are doing. So this year I leaned into SDG 15, Life on Land, but educators and schools are welcome to do whatever they wish. It really is about not pitting them against each other and saying, oh, look at all we are doing, and people feeling overwhelmed. So May Day for Sustainability happens on the 9th of May. It's usually about the second Tuesday in May. And schools just share on Twitter. And the reason I use Twitter is so that they don't feel like they have to write long reports, or they feel like they have to be doing something huge and showcasing. And all I ask them to do is share one photo and one sentence about what happened in their school. And I give them a little bit of a challenge, and you'll see that challenge on the next slide. So this year, for May 9th, I challenged the schools to create a metre of meadow anywhere in their school. And the idea behind the metre of meadow was to highlight, or to support schools to do something that they was really doable in terms of letting something go, but also acknowledging that a lot of our schools would be urban schools and may not have a green space. So supporting them to create, even with pallets and with areas, a simple meter. They could, of course, do more, and many of them did. And I'll show you some of the examples in the next few slides. But it was to find a patch of ground and just to let it go wild, and to log the kind of plants that grew there, really leaning into native plants, looking at the insect life, looking at what grew, what didn't, and how it progressed. And even though May 9th, I set the challenge early in the year, so by May 9th, hopefully that they would have something done, but it's something that will be ongoing as well. It didn't just stop on that day. And as I said, they report their progress on Twitter. So the next few slides really are just a selection. I went through the Twitter account and their Twitter accounts just to have a look at a selection of some of the things that schools did, and really wanted to give you a flavour of how schools did this differently and how educators did it differently, but everybody engaged in lots of ways. And some of them looked at other SDGs, some of them looked at formal schooling, some there were lunchtime activities, there were after school. So I think, Norman, if you want to kind of maybe just flick through these, but maybe just pause for a few seconds and I can explain some of what's going on. In this one of the things, I suppose the top slide really demonstrates the inclusion piece. This is a special education school in County Limerick, and these students don't follow all of the formal parts of the mainstream programme. So what they did was they grew herbs in the school herb garden, and they do a module called Healthy Eating, Good Health and Wellbeing, and they brought those herbs into the classroom, and then they baked with them and they wrote about it in terms of the learning unit called Personal Care and Good Health, and mapped that into SDG 3 as well. So really nice way of highlighting that lived experience in terms of sustainability and the growth within the school, and just highlighting as well, leaning into agencies. I'm really hoping to try and get our schools to collaborate. So looking at our local councils, looking at libraries, that this isn't about isolation, but about how we can all work together in terms of community. The next slide just highlights, again, schools looking at how they use lunchtime. So they had a movie and lunch, and used a movie that leaned in again to SDG 15, looking at Over the Hedge, habitat loss and human overdevelopment. So really nice again to look at not situating everything in the formal classroom. And the bottom image then highlights one of our schools who has a lot of large green space. So they've acquired themselves some goats to keep the green space in tow. So again, really nice piece of lived engagement with SDG 15 that isn't all about a whole body of knowledge, but again about context for the school because they had this space and this was something that they could do. Next slide. In this slide then, again, just giving you some examples of the curriculum piece. There's a really nice resource, one of our more well-known artists called Alice Maher, and she works an awful lot with bees, with habitat, with mosses, and creating art pieces out of that. So a module that was written around that for students in the art class. And then again, the bottom one, applied technology, looking at climate change, but also mapping it into other sustainable development goals, and all grown out of that metre of meadow experience and the interconnection and connection piece. And again, just demonstrating how one thing allows each school to lean into the area that they gained most from. The next few slides, again, you can move through them, Norman, if you wish, are just highlighting what schools did. You can see a school here in this one, their metre of meadow, No Mow May, of course, May Day for Sustainability aligning with that, and highlighting some of the plants and the flowers and the bees that were there as well. Again, just green schools committees leaning into what it looked like, taking photographs of the various bits and pieces. And because our schools, it's a voluntary piece for Irish schools. There's about over 700 post-primary second level schools in Ireland, and about a third of them are engaged with this to date. And again, the next slide just highlights a lot of insect hotels, aligned to the metre of meadow, and looking at a really lovely piece. Again, one of our special schools, the top left-hand corner, the art class made fabulous. I didn't realise bees need hydration, so they made beautiful bee baths in their art class, and their ceramic fired pieces, and they dotted them around their metre of meadow so the bees could stay hydrated and have a little bit of a bath as well. And then again, just the last few slides, just highlighting what different schools and different organizations did. But again, lots of green, and great to see this. And I've put the hashtag in at the end of the PowerPoint if anybody wants to take a trawl through Twitter and have a look at some of the colour and the collaboration that went on. And we really did encourage them not to go out and use seed bombs, but to really let the areas rewild and look at native species as well, and not to be worried about what came up, but to lean into what was there. Again, my last slide talks about the effect, and you might not be able to see it there at the top, but one of the taglines is every student in every subject in every classroom. So really leaning into that inclusion piece and saying this is everybody's business and we want to involve everybody. And I included a really nice piece there at the end, which highlights the creativity of some schools. This is an indoor metre of meadow because they hadn't an outdoor space. So they brought it inside and looked at what that might look like as well. So just, again, a flavour of the pathways piece and SDG 15 and how it leaned in very much in the formal education space, but I hope you can see how it might apply across the board. That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great timing. Thank you, Valerie. Any thoughts from anyone? I'm still reeling from the indoor meadow inspiration.
I like this project because it just feels it's doable, and it's something that's yeah, no matter what pressures individual teachers or classrooms might be under, it's something that they can get their heads around. Yeah, so it's really good.
Jenny, I think you had something to say.
Well, again, I'm struck by the creativity that has enabled such diversity in the response. I mean, it's amazing what people can do. So thank you very much.
Yes. And amazing what something means to people because of their context that we couldn't perhaps imagine because we're not in that context. So it means something to us. And that's what I find in these meetings, that everyone is taking the meaning from their own context and their own perspective. And it opens up so many more possibilities than thinking on your own. Norman.
Yeah, I like the public sharing. I thought the public sharing really expanded away from the original idea of the metre of meadow and went into all sorts of directions which you know people wouldn't think of. So just having that public display exhibition I thought was really good. And in a sense, I'm a bit disappointed with our project in that sense that we've not shared so much through our public space, our online space. Our main sharing has been through these monthly meetings, in fact, and the sort of stories that have just been told. So we do have a form of sharing, but it's not in a more public way.
Mm. But we will.
We will, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's differed from other inquiries in that sense, where I think as we've gone along, we've done a lot more sort of open sharing.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Oh, and thank you, Valerie. You've put in the chat, you've put the hashtag. So that's brilliant. Thank you. And thank you, Dory. I didn't thank you for your comment. I just moved swiftly on. So building on what you've said. So, okay. Lovely. Any more thoughts? I mean, there will be more thoughts, but maybe not immediate. And oh, Glyn, yes, you wanted to. We need your sound. We need your sound, Glyn.
I really like the running track for the goats. I thought that was really creative.
We're hoping they'll qualify for the next Olympics. It'll be all good.
but I also like the notion that they were not just looking at horizontal space; they were looking at vertical or and particularly for urban schools where they have to be creative.
Yeah.
And I had one last thought, which is, are there any potential for roof gardens?
Yeah, I mean, this year, I would be hoping that they would continue with that metre of meadow. But as you guys have all said, it really is about supporting people to take that first step. And as you said, sometimes I think we don't realize how well we're doing, because a lot of the conversation is around the urgency and the panic and how far behind we are. And I think we do need every now and again just to say to people, you are taking a millimetre forward, keep going, keep doing that. And because it was on that, I suppose, social media, and I know Twitter isn't glorious in lots of ways, but I encourage people to blinker themselves and don't look and say, look, this is just about saying you're doing great, or can I steal that idea, or can I share? And I think people have been really generous and in getting ideas from other people, which has been really, really good. So I think certainly worthwhile looking at that social media space.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. Jenny?
I want to come back to the goat idea, because what struck me there was that opens up a whole new set of projects into the future. And I imagine that
Sorry, I'm laughing at us all having a goat. So yeah.
I'm assuming that goats are there to stay, and therefore there will be, yes. So there will be the opportunity for further explorations.
Yes, great. Norman?
Time scale again,
Yes.
so watching wildflowers grow. I mean, I sowed seed in March, and it was really only the very end of June. I was very impatient, but they take their own time, and when they come, and they're beautiful. But it teaches us just to be patient, doesn't it? These sorts of things, when we're dealing with nature, teaches us to be patient.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we've had our two sort of reports on what's happened so far, and what has been motivating us, and what we think we've achieved and what the possibilities are. So that's been great. I think now it's time to turn to Jenny, and Jenny has been offering us synthesis and analysis, and we've been answering questions, we've been giving Jenny information as we've gone through these last few months. So what are we hearing about today, Jenny?
I pre-recorded this ready for the last meeting, which obviously had other agenda at the time. So I don't know if, Norman, do you want to run through the recording I did then, or do you want me to do it afresh?
No, Jenny, I'm hoping that I can find it and play it.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Sri Lanka, where I'm actually attending a family birthday. So my apologies that I can't be with you. I have, however, put together a summary of all the responses which you kindly made to our additional questions. So a big thank you to those of you who responded. So just to remind you of the background. For our last meeting, we conducted a quantitative survey into motivations. And then we had a lot of discussion at the last meeting about it, and it was obvious that this was an issue that needed further exploration, helped not least by, of course, Norman's first draft of what motivation looked like. Based on that, we asked you to respond this time in a narrative way to 4 questions. First of all, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Then looking at the motivational challenges and what, if anything, has been demotivating for you. Thirdly, we asked you to look at how commitment to what you're doing is achieved, and some people went on and added extra bits for that. And the 4th question was, how do you deal with the gap between the enormity of the challenge of trying to help when we feel that we are so small and the gap is just too great for us to deal with. So this presentation summarizes the emergent themes from the 9 returns that we received, plus any salient points that came up during the discussion in last month's Zoom meeting. That meeting, if any of you want to review it, is available on the link here. So first of all, the first question asked, what are you doing and what is causing you to do it? I've divided the responses here into two parts. So this slide looks specifically at what is causing you to do it. There were some broad categories which are somewhat artificial. They're a little bit contrived and they are slightly iterative, as you'll see, but I think they help us understand more or less what's happening. The first theme is a perceived need or a gap or a change that is required. And here you have some typical responses. I saw and felt that there was a gap in relation to staff development workshops. Much of the language and action around sustainability can be negative, and so on. The second theme was to do with values, beliefs, and ethical issues, having a sense of guilt for not doing something, responsibility, caring about things, believing that aspirations can come true. The third theme was indirectly to do with self-actualization. I do it for myself. I've interpreted that as wanting to feel good. Then one person has talked about her role as being a grandmother for the first time, which has prompted her to think about the legacy that she is leaving for her children and grandchildren. And then the fourth theme was to do with relations. We're doing it with others and for others, so a slightly altruistic reason here. The second part of question 2 was, what is causing you to do it? So some responses actually explained the methods that they're using to go about. So drawing on or developing existing frameworks or skills. You've got some examples here. I'm part of a local charity, my involvement in previous Lifewide inquiries, and so on. Then we had determination and resilience. I'm doing it by sticking to my guns. Setting realistic goals was a common theme as well, having to set something that was manageable. One person though says, I've always been a practical dreamer, which I think is a beautiful image, someone dreaming and yet being practical at the same time. Question 2 asked, what have been the motivational challenges? And here we have the practical issues such as making time, finding energy to fit in with everything else that we have to do in our lives, the difficulties of getting people together, and changes. One person pointed out very explicitly, though others made it implicit, that change needs to happen at the grassroots level. Now, how do you get to that grassroots level? Then there were relationships. One person remarked upon having seen an example of one child's experience, and that was enough to change their mindset. Others talked about having the interest and support of family members. On the converse, so trying to engage others. So you see the two extremes of relationships, both positive and negative, which we'll come back to at the end of the presentation. Personal qualities, of course, are important, having self-discipline. One person mentioned that not having a fundamental interest was actually a deterrent. Then ethical issues again, the greater needs of others, feeling a sense of pride in being able to work with younger generation who are perhaps more motivated and more understanding than we do. And then feeling that it had to be something that was demanding. It wasn't enough to go for the easy option and just opt to do a project that was something with which the person was familiar. Finally, we had the idea of being inspired. Modelling was something we talked about at the last meeting, and here we have some examples of teachers being inspired by the younger generation and making inroads, whereas parents were being obstructive. Question 2 asked, what, if anything, has been demotivating? So the factors again are really the mirror image of what we've just seen. So practical issues such as having to dig during a very wet period, or working alone, not having anyone to bounce ideas off or be chivied along by. Then there are systematic issues such as having the bureaucracy to get through, navigating through hierarchies, getting the commitment of other people. The last one, talking about language, is something that came up a couple of times too, the fact that we have a narrative discourse about the SDGs. Commitment, again, trying to work with others and through them who may not be interested is demotivating, the difficulties of trying to keep them motivated, lack of participation, and when people fail to deliver what they've said that they will do. The scale and time was an enormous issue, the length of the project and the sheer scale of what has to be done. Feedback also featured as very important, needing to know whether what we're doing actually is having any impact. And the fact that there's no immediate feedback can be very demotivating because we don't know whether we're on the right track or not. Moving on to question 3. So in the context of the SDGs, how does commitment to what you're trying to accomplish form? What creates it? There were the practical methodological issues such as taking one step at a time, looking at what is going on at the moment and taking it day by day, week by week. One person talked about mindfulness, another talked about having to meditate or being able to meditate to help them get through things. Joining hands with many will help share the workload, making it easier. Again, sharing resources and sharing stories. So sharing was an important issue. Belief and determination, again, sticking to my guns. This was a way of going about it. Knowing that I've tried hard even if my objectives haven't been achieved. And relying on the belief to keep me going. Ethical issues, again, this fear of letting people down. And then relationships, having a family member on the team was helpful. Formed by and reinforced by how I'm starting to see myself in a new role. Having other people who are interested in the same ideas and the same passion. Modelling, which I mentioned a few moments ago, being fueled by what I read and see and hear and being able to imitate or develop other people's ideas. And then finally, recognition, which is this feedback issue in reverse really, needing to be recognised either intrinsically by feeling that you've been successful or external recognition, for example, in obtaining funding. Question 4, how do you deal with the gap between the enormity of the challenge and how does the scale of the challenge affect your motivation? Here we had positive attitude was very important, remembering that actions can be contagious and that they can have an impact, a sort of snowballing effect, if you like. Recognizing that news is often manipulated and therefore we only see the extremes, not the reality, and maybe the less sizable but nevertheless important actions that are taking place. Thinking that we're being exposed to negative aspects of language again, this negative discourse. And the scale, one person said the scale might be more off-putting than the potential to overcome it, which is a positive reminder to us all. Belief in the cause, so fundamental to motivation is believing that what you're doing is worthwhile, thinking of the legacy potential of what we're doing, and that we could be sowing seeds as well as another form of legacy. Then practice, so when I connect what I'm doing with my everyday life, I can reduce something that's enormous to something manageable. So these are the practical steps of going about it. We're working on a smaller scale, and perhaps because we're on that smaller scale, this person suggested there's no need to be aggressive and crazy in the way we interact with each other. One person actually summed up all the issues very neatly by saying, the role of modelling, the impact of an attitude, the power of our actions over our words, reminds me what we are doing, why I keep going, trying, despite the overwhelming size of the problem. motivated to do my bit, hoping to achieve a planet through little personal bits which are contagious, encouraging others to join. So those were a summary of the key points. We now look at what we have learned from this. Norman posited a continuum from inaction to action. And his initial model was, as you can see here, on the left-hand side, we've got rejection because of inaction leading to because of ignorance and ambivalence relating to or resulting in rejection. The factors that can be either positive or negative in their impact, leading here to action, from limited to committed, through activism to extremism. And he proposed that the positive factors were perception of a need or gap and belief in interest. Well, here you can see that was something that was raised in our feedback. The opportunity for self-actualization wasn't mentioned, but ethical values, altruistic values, love, guilt, responsibility were. Partnerships, the practical methodological, was not part of the model, so I'll come back to that shortly. Recognition was important, both extrinsic and intrinsic, but that was not mentioned either. So sorry, I pressed a little bit too soon. Looking now at the negative factors, lack of interest, so it's that same factor, but moving in the opposite direction. Then we also had in our feedback practical and systemic issues, the scale and time of the projects, the delayed or lack of feedback. So to answer the question, do our responses support this? My answer is yes, but it's clear that motivation derives from both personal, which is all these positive factors that were in the original model, and external factors, which are the ones lacking arrows here. So in my final slide, I've proposed a development on this model. So this is something when I leave you, perhaps you would like to discuss further. I've taken the basic premise of inaction at one end, action at the other end. We've then got the personal qualities, the awareness, interest, values, beliefs, responsibility, love, guilt, and so on. I've placed them in the middle because they can have either, if they're lacking, obviously they can lead to inaction. If they're in positive quantities, they can lead to one or other of these activities. I've now added at the bottom the external practical conditions that were raised. So systems, practices, scale, time, and recognition. So I hope that that has been clear, and despite the fan and everything that I have going in the background here, you've been able to follow me, and that it's given you something to discuss. So enjoy the rest of the meeting. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for your recording. And gave us some things to think about, in an interesting set of responses that some of us will recognize they're our responses perhaps, but and your proposal at the end.
I think the examples that we've seen, the two presentations earlier, actually exemplify beautifully what was perhaps more dryly put in those slides. So any comments?
Yes, when you were talking about the practical conditions, it made me think about all the local context things that came up in Valerie's presentation that meant that something was doable even in a context where there was no outdoors, for example. And so the practical seems quite important. We can have all the personal commitment in the world, but unless we can see a way to do something, and I think we've struggled with that. We've discussed that in other meetings, haven't we, ourselves?
But I think for me, the issue there is creativity. And again, what is the relationship between creativity and an underpinning motivation? If there is a will, there is a way. And we saw that very, very clearly in Valerie's projects.
Any thoughts from anyone else? I mean,
Russ?
something. Sorry, Russ, I didn't see.
Just to say, I really like Jenny's model there of motivation. It really resonates with me and my guilt. And I've been thinking about, am I just sort of being pessimistic about my lack of agency now that I'm retired? I don't have an official context for influencing people, but that doesn't stop me from doing something. I've got to do something, and I'm going to start inviting my own children to think about these things. I've sort of shied away from it, but I'm going to give it a try and see where it goes. The idea of just doing something, just do something and see what happens. And maybe that will tap into this exponential potential of action, as has emerged from things that a number of people have said. Maybe publicize the SDGs a bit more, and actually get in there and do something to banish my guilt. I think that's it.
Yeah, great. Good luck.
Well, I share that sense of guilt, but I come back to Glyn's approach, which I think, really caught my interest when you talked about it previously, Glyn, how you've taken something very personal. You've decided to cut out one meal a day. You've looked at what you're saving in terms of finance, but then you're feeding what you've, sorry about the pun there, unintended. You're actually putting the money that you've saved into the next level. You're going out into society. And I think that's a wonderful way of actually extending from the personal gradually outwards. And I don't know if we can take Russ and I maybe inspiration from that. I think we've lost Glyn now.
Yes. I don't know what you said, Jenny. Glyn looks like he's coming back.
Hopefully. Hello.
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not at home. I'm actually enjoying the setting sun in North Wales. So a very selfish position to be in. Hello.
Hello. Yes, we can hear you, and we're all envious.
I've lost sight of everyone. I don't know what's happened.
Your video's frozen, but we can hear you, and that looks better now. So
okay.
You were being complimented on your approach.
Thank you, Jenny. That was very kind. I can see you now again. I'm happy. Seeing people makes things much better. I feel as though there is a body beyond the internet.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up on the idea of action, particularly because love is an action, and guilt is also an action. It's our behavior that we demonstrate as a result of loving or feeling guilty. So we can't, although the terms separate out philosophically, you can talk about love and guilt without thinking about any action, but it is actually an internal action, and it's one which makes us connect with family or not with family, as Russ has just said, and driving people, as Valerie's driven the May the 9th. Yes, I like the May Day analogy with help. That was really nice. So we shouldn't divorce the feelings from the action too much, because they are part of a continuum, I believe.
Mm.
Sorry, I was just reflecting on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay, well, that's a lovely note for us to kind of ponder your reflection there, Glyn. Norman, can I hand over to you, because I think
very, very, very quickly now, and I completely agree, Glyn. I think the whole motivational forces that drive us, it's about emotional responses to our circumstances, to our environment, to what we believe in. It's all connected. So it's really very important, I think, to what we've been doing. So we've focused a lot on motivation. And I think as we come towards the end of our project, our 6 months projects, we want to look at the effect that it's had on us, the effect that the experiences we've been involved in have had on us. So with Jenny and Melissa, we've been talking about 3 or 4 questions that we might pose to ourselves. I was going to show them now, but I think it's probably better that we just circulate these afterwards. And basically the thrust is, how has it affected us? In what ways, and particularly our sense of who we are, our sense of well-being, our health? How has what we have been doing affected us? Because I think that's a really important thing to try and bring to the surface. So that's all I'm going to say, but we can return to this in the next meeting. But I will circulate with Jenny and Melissa the questions before that meeting, that we can start getting some feedback from ourselves.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Norman. So that's capturing what we feel has happened. It seems shocking to think that so many months have gone past, and that we're nearing the end. So capturing that, and I think that'll be fascinating to think about based on what we've heard today and discussed today. That's going to be fascinating. So thank you, everybody, for joining today and for offering your views or presenting or being here. Glyn even just liked your faces. So that's been a fabulous meeting. So thank you very much to everybody. I think that's everything. We'll see you in early September.
Thank you, Melissa.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye. Thank you.